Hello and welcome. We're here to talk about the Roy Gray series written by Peter James, and 2025 marks the 20th anniversary of the Gray series. So yeah, let me begin with the introduction of the concept of the series, just in case someone's not familiar with it. It's basically a crime fiction novel series of police procedural stories, and the main character, Detective Superintendent Roy Grace, is a Brighton cop, murder detective, and the first book we meet with him is the first in the chronological order, of course. That's simple. He's got a sidekick, Glenn Branson. We're gonna get to know him a bit more as well over the coming books, and let's begin. That simple tells the tale of childhood friends who are out on a stag night, and secretly the guys planned a prank upon the groom, and that will go horribly wrong. The plan is that they're going to have Michael buried in a coffin until the rest of the guys go to a strip club. As they get Michael drunk, they drive a van, hopping from pub to pub, crawling from bar to bar, and when they arrive to a secluded area on the countryside, and they turn onto a dirt road with the van they drive in. Michael's out cold in the back, he's rolling about mumbling, he's really drunk. They basically put him in a coffin and lower the coffin in pre-dug grave. And before they seal the coffin, they put a bottle of whiskey, a porn mag, a flashlight, and a two-way radio, a CB radio, with him in the coffin. And then they screw the lid down and leave him there. They shovel a bit of earth on top and put a big sheet of corrugated iron, big rusty iron bit, on top to cover the lot. It's a terrible day, it's raining, and it's not really looking good. The guy's drunk, get back in the van, drive off. And just as they started to roll on the main road, they talk on the radio. Obviously Michael's freaking out in the grave, in this coffin, all claustrophobic, begging them to turn back. And come on guys, don't do that, and all sorts of things we can imagine. And while in the van, the friends haggle about or dealing with the radio, and they pass it on to one another. They fail to look at the road, especially Robo who's driving, and the accident happens that leaves 3 dead and 1 on life support. There's a friend that has not turned up on this stag do because his plane was late, and he is Mark Warren. Mark Warren also is part of this childhood gang of friends, and they planned this stag night all together. And Mark Warren gets home to his apartment, which is a swanky block of apartments on the seaside in Brighton called the Van Allen Building, and he sees the answering machine blinking as he listens to it, There's messages. First messages only tell about how the Stag Night is going on, because the guy said that he would be updated and Mark would join him later. But the next messages are more and more disturbing. They're telling about an accident, and at the end, Mark finds out most of his friends have died. And we will find cool twists and turns along the way, and it fits Peter James's thrillers. Because while most of them are not whodunits, actually there is one whodunit book, one and a half altogether, I would consider one and a half whodunits. Most of them are quite straightforward, who the killers are, not necessarily straight away by name, because he likes to call them Mystery Man and Dark Man, the Hooded Man and all this. But at the end of the day, mostly we know what the killer is up to, and most of the time, most of the books don't hide him away too much, deliberately not, because it's like a cat and mouse game. We concentrate on how the investigating team catches up with him, and that's essentially what happens in this book as well. But twists and turns along the way, as I say, in the stories of the series basically are interesting, because the tale, the plot, the story takes wild turns. It's not about who the perpetrator is. We might know that, but we don't see the changes coming in the story. We kind of think that we figured it all out. Even sometimes it's explained quite clearly in the books how the perpetrator thinks, and we kind of snuggle into the idea there, yeah, he's a nutter, we know what's going on. And then suddenly we find out, no, we didn't know anything about it. And I think that's one of the strengths of these books. They really, really well written and really informative, not only about police work, but most of the books are themed in a way. They have themes, especially the later books, dealing with everyday things, maybe even global issues, not calling them global issues, but things that every man just kind of ignores in day-to-day life, even though we read about these issues in the paper. It might interfere with our daily life, and we just switch over the news maybe when they're on, but eventually I like the idea that Peter James does deal with some of these in his books. Now, Peter James is a Brighton writer, Brighton-born writer, and his books obviously play in Brighton, as Roy Grace is a Brighton detective, fictional Brighton detective, based on a real person. And we're going to be talking about these things a bit later, maybe in another video. Anyhow, and yeah, we learn a lot about Brighton as well as we read Peter James. There's loads of little hints and loads of tidbit and trivial information about historical facts of Brighton. Peter James does his research very well into every book.
I've written several that really scared me. I think the scariest scene was in Dead Simple, where the groom-to-be, married in a few days' time, is buried alive in a coffin as a prank, stag night prank by his mates. And he spends much of the book in that coffin. So to get that atmosphere, I felt, I've got to be put in a coffin too. And I arranged with a firm of undertakers. I said, would you put me in a coffin, screw the lid down and leave me for 30 minutes? I am deeply claustrophobic. I can't even sit in the back of a two-door car. Anyway, I rocked up at this firm. Oh yes, you've come to be put in a coffin, haven't you? He says, we've got it all prepared for you. You really want to do this? And I said, I do. And he said, you really want me to screw the lid down? And I said, I do. And you want me to leave you for 30 minutes? I said, yeah. I had checked with the coroner. And I said, how much time do you have in a coffin? And the coroner said, well, if it's well made, 4 or 5 hours. He said, if you breathe normally, but if you hyperventilate, you could knock that down to 40 minutes. He closes the lid, right, and it all goes completely dark. I hear the screws going, and my first thought is, what if there's a spider in here? And then I'm thinking, what if he drops dead? You know, what if he goes across the road to get a coffee and gets run over? It was the longest 30 minutes of my life. I was absolutely drenched in sweat, but it enabled me to write that character, Michael, in the coffin, I think, extremely powerfully.
And I think it reflects on the books, on the stories, and in the readability, if there's such a word. So yeah, talking about That Simple, and that's the point when we meet Roy Grace. He's stuck in a traffic jam, obviously because of the accidents the Stack people suffered. He goes into headquarters, the police headquarters, and he learns about that the tailback, the traffic jam will be a while because of a van being crashed, and he's heading for a date that he's way too late for, and he will be late, and he's not in a good mood. And at this point we need to acknowledge that Peter James is really good at presenting the reality of police officers, that they have to go to court as witnesses and present the evidence for the prosecution. Therefore, we learn that Roy Grace has a case like this coming up, a court case coming up, and he's not feeling really good about it because of his past. Sandy is his wife, and she disappeared from the face of the earth just coming up to 9 years ago to the story in the book. He's tried finding her for many years, tried everything, including clairvoyance. So he did need to try everything, even if he's skeptical about it. Now, because of this, he's in touch with a dude called Henry Frayne, and occasionally he visits him through along his murder inquiries and asks for help. And because of this, the local newspapers and many people kind of laugh at him and ridicule him. Even headlines are written about his interest in occult. And the court case he is witness in contained an evidence that he had taken to Henry Frayne, and because of this he's risking the whole case to be successfully dealt with, and to the prosecution to manage to basically prosecute the perpetrator of the case he'd investigated. With this mindset, the court hearing is not going too well, and as he goes back in the office after the court hearing in the afternoon, he gets called to the ACC. She's the boss. He gets told off because of this medium he visited and the evidence he'd shown, and Alison Wasper tells him that if he keeps doing this, if the police gets laughed at and ridiculed in headlines of the local newspaper, it can get really bad for his career. So he's in a really bad mood again. With this, he goes back in his office, sits down, and his phone rings. He picks it up, and he gets put through to a person, a colleague, another detective, a detective sergeant, who Roy Grace worked with before, and he likes the man. And Glenn Branson would like to have a chat with Roy Grace because Glenn is investigating a missing persons case and asks Roy to help him out with his thoughts. So they agree that they meet up at the missing person's residence, and the missing person obviously is a Michael Harrison, reported missing by the wife-to-be Ashley. Actually, we meet Glenn Branson in an earlier book, years before That Simple was written, and this is Denial, published in 1998. Glenn Branson is in here, and we can take a look-see at him as a rookie detective, even though he is just an officer within the story and not a main character, if you like. Still, we get a glimpse into an early case he is investigating, but I will talk about it in a different episode later on. Now, as the afternoon comes, Roy Grace and Graham Branson meet up at the apartment of Michael Harrington, but they find nothing significant. They do see the pictures around the flat, pictures of him and his girlfriend, and they wonder that, did he get cold feet? Did he run off from this whole wedding thing? They find no significant lead in the flat, so they leave. There's no spoilers in the short videos, so I will not tell any more of the plot. If you want to hear it, you'd read the book and you would like to recapture some moments of it, and interested in a longer video, 3/4 of an hour, maybe even longer, where I deep dive into the plots of these books, look at the channel. You will find it there very soon. As for the review or thoughts on the book itself, it's a strong opening for the series, I believe. I still believe, I read it multiple times. One of my favorites is a cliche to say, but it is, because it's unique in a way to the other ones. And I will speak about that in the forthcoming videos, because I will slowly try to look into the characters that we will meet along the way, and I did not want to overwhelm this video with character description. The book does that, and I always suggest, do read the book, or if you had read it and you can bear with me accent and my voice, then I'm happy if you listen, comment and discuss what you think of this. Anyway, I think it's a strong opening, and what makes it interesting from a different perspective is that it was based on a short story that Peter James had written and was published in The Twist of the Knife. It's a collection of short stories. Online you could have read it as in collections of short shockers, I believe. That was an online book, electric book or whatever they call these. And this one collected them in 2014. It has a short story, it's called That Simple Plan. And That Simple Plan tells the story of the stag do going bad, the prank going really wrong, and it leaves the tale as it is. The guys get killed in the van smash, the CB radio runs out of battery, and no one ever finds out about Michael being there. Really interesting to compare the two, actually, all these many years later. And I like that the author kept the basic idea, inclusive of names, like Ashley is already there, Michael, Robbo, and I really like that the Undertaker's company. Cool, really cool. We're gonna start to drift on to the other books in the series, and who knows, see you in the next one.